How long has she been lying here? Dante Russo's voice cut through the February night like a blade sharp enough to make his men flinch. The king of Chicago's underworld stood at the back entrance of Elysium, his most exclusive club, staring down at something that made his blood run cold. A woman, crumpled against the brick wall like discarded trash, her ivory dress torn and stained crimson. "Boss, we just found her," Marco started, but Dante was already kneeling, his $2,000 suit meeting the grimy pavement without hesitation. She was barely conscious. Dark hair matted with blood obscured her face and bruises bloomed across her exposed skin like violent flowers. Dante's jaw tightened as he took in the defensive wounds on her arms, the torn fabric, the way she'd curled into herself as if trying to disappear. "Who did this to you?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. Her eyes fluttered open, startling green, even glazed with pain, and locked onto his. For a moment, neither moved. Then her lips parted, blood staining the corner of her mouth as she struggled to speak. "Please," the word was barely audible, "don't let him find me." Something ancient and primal roared to life in Dante's chest. In 15 years of ruling Chicago's criminal underworld, he'd seen every shade of violence, every flavor of fear. But the raw terror in this woman's eyes ignited something he'd thought long dead. "Marco, get the car, now!" Dante's voice was lethal calm. "Call Dr. Chen, tell her she has a patient and I don't care if she's in surgery, she comes now." "Boss, shouldn't we call?" Did I stutter? Dante's eyes were black ice as he carefully slid his arms beneath the woman. She whimpered, and he felt each sound like a knife to the gut. "No hospitals, no police, no one knows about this, understood?" As he lifted her, her head lolled against his chest, and she mumbled something incoherent. Dante looked down at her battered face and made a silent promise that would change everything. Whoever did this was already dead, they just didn't know it yet. 72 hours earlier. Isabella Morty had exactly 3 rules for survival: never trust anyone, never stay in one place too long, never ever fall in love. She'd broken the 3rd rule 6 months ago, and it had nearly killed her. Standing in the bathroom of her modest Chicago apartment, she studied her reflection with clinical detachment. The bruise on her ribs from 2 weeks ago had finally faded to a sickly yellow. The cut on her cheekbone covered with makeup was almost invisible. She'd gotten better at hiding them. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, "Where are you? You're late." Her stomach twisted. She was always late these days, carefully calculating the exact moment when he'd be annoyed but not angry. There was a difference. One she'd learned to measure in shades of violence. "On my way," she typed back, her hands steady through years of practice. "Traffic." Another buzz, "You're lying. I can always tell when you're lying, Bella. We'll discuss this later." Isabella's blood turned to ice. Later meant behind closed doors. Later meant excuses that no one would believe. Later meant she'd be covering new bruises by morning. She'd tried to leave him twice. The first time, Marcus had found her within 6 hours and broken 2 of her ribs. The second time, he'd made it clear the next attempt would be her last. Marcus Vitelli wasn't just possessive, he was connected. His family had roots in the old country, ties to people who made problems disappear. But Isabella Morty hadn't survived 28 years by giving up easily. Tonight, she had a plan. Finally, after months of careful preparation, she had everything in place. A new identity, cash she'd been skimming from her job at the art gallery, and a bus ticket to Seattle leaving at midnight from a station Marcus would never think to watch. She just had to survive dinner first. The restaurant Marcus chose was beautiful and public. He always was in public. The perfect gentleman pulling out her chair, ordering wine with easy confidence, smiling at her like she was his entire world. "You look stunning," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Isabella smiled back, the expression feeling like glass on her face. "Thank you." "I was thinking," Marcus continued, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm that made her skin crawl, "maybe it's time we made this official. Moved in together, what do you think?" Her heart stopped. That's sudden." His grip tightened just slightly, just enough. "Is it? We've been together for 6 months, Isabella, unless you're not serious about us." There it was, the edge beneath the silk, the threat wrapped in a question. "Of course I am," she lied smoothly. I need to give notice on my apartment, arrange things at work." "Your landlord will understand and the gallery will manage." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll send movers tomorrow, pack what matters, will replace the rest." No, this wasn't the plan. If she moved in with him, she'd never escape. The walls would close in until there was nothing left of Isabella Morty but a ghost. "Marcus, Is there a problem?" His voice dropped, lethal and soft. She was trapped. Agree and lose her chance at freedom, or refuse and face his rage right here, right now. Either way, she was. "Actually, there is a problem." They both turned. A man stood beside their table, tall, silver-haired, with eyes like winter storms. Isabella didn't recognize him, but Marcus clearly did. Her boyfriend's face went white, then red. "Mr. Benedetti," Marcus said tightly, "this is a private dinner." "And this is my restaurant," the older man replied pleasantly. "I make it my business to know who's dining here, especially when they're making my other guests uncomfortable with their intensity." Marcus's hand was crushing Isabella's now. "We're having a conversation." "You're having a conversation? The young lady looks like she'd rather be anywhere else." Benedetti's gaze shifted to Isabella, and she saw something unexpected, recognition, not of her specifically but of her situation. "Miss, is everything all right?" It was a lifeline, a chance, the kind that might never come again. Isabella looked at Marcus, at his rage barely leashed, at the promise of retribution in his eyes, and then at Benedetti. In that split second, she made a choice that would alter the trajectory of her life. "No," she whispered, "it's not." Marcus's grip became painful. "Isabella." "Let her go." Benedetti's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Now." For a moment, Marcus didn't move. Then, with visible effort, he released her hand and stood. "This isn't over," he said quietly, the words meant only for her. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He threw money on the table and left, and Isabella sat there shaking, knowing he was right. Benedetti offered to have her driven home, but Isabella declined. She couldn't go home. Marcus would be there or watching. She couldn't go to the bus station. He'd think of that now. She couldn't go anywhere familiar. She walked Chicago's streets for hours, her mind racing. By the time she realized she'd wandered into a neighborhood she didn't recognize, it was past midnight. The streets were darker here, emptier. She'd made another mistake. The footsteps behind her confirmed it. "Did you really think an old man could save you?" Marcus's voice turned her blood to ice. Isabella ran, her heels clattering on pavement, but he was faster. He always was. His hand tangled in her hair, yanking her into an alley, and then the first blow came. "You humiliated me," he snarled between hits. In front of everyone, in front of Benedetti. Isabella tried to fight back, but Marcus was stronger, angrier, more brutal than he'd ever been. She felt ribs crack, tasted blood, heard her own screams like they came from someone else. "Please," she begged, "please, Marcus. You're mine." His hands found her throat. "If I can't have you, nobody can." The world went gray at the edges. Through the haze, Isabella saw lights, a building, music thumping, people, a club, if she could just. She drove her knee up with the last of her strength. Marcus howled, and his grip loosened just enough. Isabella tore away, stumbling toward the lights, toward people, toward anything that wasn't this alley and her death. She almost made it. Marcus caught her at the club's back entrance, away from the crowds. One final, vicious blow sent her crashing against the brick wall, and the darkness finally won. The last thing she remembered was falling. The last thing she heard was footsteps, different footsteps, and a voice like distant thunder. What the hell happened here? Isabella woke to softness. After years of making herself small, of sleeping light in case she needed to run, of never feeling truly safe, the sensation was so foreign it took her several moments to identify it. Silk sheets, a mattress that felt like clouds, warmth without threat. She opened her eyes. The room was enormous, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows showing a Chicago skyline she'd never seen from this angle. Dawn light painted everything gold and pink, and for a surreal moment, Isabella wondered if she died and this was some elaborate afterlife. Then the pain hit. She gasped, every injury Marcus had inflicted making itself known. Ribs screaming, head pounding, body one massive bruise, but beneath the pain was something else, professional care. Her wounds had been cleaned and bandaged, an IV in her arm, monitors beeping softly nearby. "You're awake." Isabella's head snapped toward the voice, a mistake that made the room spin. A man sat in a chair by the window, backlit by sunrise, and for a moment all she could see was his silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, dangerous. Then he leaned forward and her breath caught. He was beautiful in the way ancient statues were beautiful, all sharp angles and cold perfection. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that looked carved from marble. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, and he watched her with an intensity that should have terrified her. It didn't, somehow impossibly she felt safe. "Who are you?" Her voice was raw, probably from screaming. "Dante Russo," he said it like she should know the name. When she didn't react, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or approval. "This is my home, you've been here for 3 days. 3 days, she'd lost 3 days. The doctor said you had 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, internal bruising, and," his jaw tightened, "other injuries. They've stabilized you, but you need rest." Isabella's mind raced, trying to piece together what happened. The restaurant, Benedetti, Marcus, the alley, the club, and then... "You found me," she whispered, "outside your club." "Yes." "Why didn't you take me to a hospital?" Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "You begged me not to let him find you. Hospitals keep records. Records can be found. I made a judgment call." He was right, if Marcus knew where she was. "He'll find me anyway." The words tasted like ash. "He always does." "Not here." Something in Dante's voice made her look up. His eyes were black fire, and she suddenly understood why he'd seemed dangerous. He was, lethally so. "I don't know who hurt you, but I give you my word, while you're under my protection, no one touches you, no one even gets close." Isabella wanted to laugh, wanted to tell him that men's promises were worthless, that protection was just another word for possession. But there was something in his gaze that stopped her. He meant it. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Dante stood, moving to the window, his hands in his pockets. For a long moment he was silent. Then, "When I was 8 years old, I watched my father beat my mother to death. I was too small, too weak to stop him. I swore that day that I would never be powerless again, and I would never let another man hurt a woman if I could prevent it." The words hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. "I'm sorry," Isabella whispered. "Don't be. That boy died the same night she did." He turned back to her and his face was unreadable. "Rest. Dr. Chen will check on you this afternoon. If you need anything, there's a call button by the bed. You're safe here, Isabella." He was halfway to the door when she found her voice. "How do you know my name?" Dante paused. "Your ID was in your purse. The purse was beside you in the alley." "And you haven't." "No," he cut her off, understanding immediately. "I had my female staff change your clothes and tend to you. I never touched you beyond carrying you to the car. You have my word." She believed him. God help her, she believed him. "The man who did this to you," Dante said softly, "what's his name?" "Why?" His smile was cold and absolutely terrifying. "So I know what name to put on the headstone." Then he was gone, and Isabella was left alone with the morning light and the strangest feeling blooming in her chest. Hope. 7 days later. Isabella was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. She'd learned several things in her week at Dante Russo's penthouse. First, that he was rarely there. His business, whatever it was, kept him away most nights. Second, that his staff were loyal to the point of fanaticism and treated her with careful respect. Third, that the penthouse had more security than Fort Knox, which should have made her feel trapped but somehow didn't. And fourth, most unsettling, she looked forward to the hours when Dante was home. He checked on her each evening, their conversations brief but charged with something she couldn't name. He never asked about her past, never pressured her to explain. He simply existed in her space. A dark and dangerous presence that made her feel paradoxically safe. Tonight, she found him on the terrace, the city spread beneath them like scattered diamonds. He didn't turn when she approached, but she knew he'd heard her. "You should be resting," he said. "I've been resting for a week. I'm going stir-crazy." She moved to the railing, keeping careful distance between them. "Dr. Chen says I'm healing well." "Good." Silence settled, comfortable and strange. Finally, Isabella asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Who are you really? And don't say just a businessman." Dante's lips curved. "What do you think I am?" I think you're someone people fear. I think your business isn't legal. I think those men who guard this building would kill for you without question. She met his eyes. I think you're exactly the kind of man I should run from. Then why are you still here? Because you've shown me more kindness in a week than anyone has in years. Because you've asked nothing of me. Because when you look at me, she trailed off, unsure how to finish. How do I look at you? His voice was rough. Like I'm not broken. Dante moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 steps. He didn't touch her, but she felt the heat of him, the coiled violence barely restrained beneath his civilized exterior. You're not broken, he said quietly. You're a survivor, there's a difference. What if I told you his name? The words escaped before she could stop them. What if I told you who did this to me? Then I'd do what I promised. I'd make sure he never hurt anyone again. You'd kill him. Without hesitation. Isabella should have been horrified, should have recoiled from this man who discussed murder with the same ease others discussed the weather. Instead, she felt something crack open in her chest, something dark and hungry and long suppressed. Marcus Vitelli, she whispered. His name is Marcus Vitelli. Dante went very still. Say that again. Marcus Vitelli, he's... I know who he is. Dante's voice was ice. Small-time enforcer for the Vitelli family, thinks he's more important than he is, has a reputation for... He stopped, his jaw working. For hurting women, Isabella finished. I know, I wasn't the first, I won't be the last. Yes, Dante said, and there was murder in his eyes. You will be. Over the following days, Isabella watched Dante transform from the controlled, careful man she'd come to know into something else entirely. Something ancient and merciless. He made phone calls in Italian, rapid-fire conversations she couldn't follow. Men came and went from the penthouse at all hours, hard men with cold eyes who nodded respectfully to her and then disappeared into Dante's office. The air itself seemed to change, charged with violence waiting to be unleashed. You're planning something, she said one evening, finding him at his desk, papers spread before him. I'm always planning something. Dante. He looked up and she saw the predator beneath the polish. Did you know Marcus Vitelli has put a price on your head? $20,000 to anyone who can find you and bring you back to him. Ice flooded her veins. What? My sources tell me he's been searching for you since that night. He's convinced you're hiding somewhere in the city. He's getting desperate. Dante's smile was razor sharp. Good, desperate men make mistakes. You're using me as bait. No, he stood, moving around the desk. I'm using his obsession with you to destroy him. There's a difference, but I need your permission first. Isabella stared at him. My permission for what? To let him know you're alive, to let him think he's found you. Dante's eyes burned. I'll have every advantage, every precaution in place. You'll never be in actual danger, but he needs to believe he has a chance just long enough for me to end this permanently. And if something goes wrong? It won't. You can't promise that. Yes, Dante said softly, and he reached out to cup her face. The first time he'd truly touched her since that night in the alley. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, gentle over the fatting bruise. I can, because I'll be damned before I let anyone hurt you again. Isabella closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. She should say no, should refuse to be part of whatever dark game Dante was playing, should remember her rules, never trust anyone. But she'd already broken that rule, hadn't she? Somewhere between the pain and the healing, between the careful distance and these stolen moments, she'd started to trust Dante Russo. More than that, she'd started to fall for him. What do you need me to do? She whispered. The plan was simple. Isabella would visit the art gallery where she used to work, a public appearance that would inevitably reach Marcus's ears. She'd be visible, vulnerable, seemingly unprotected. In reality, Dante's men would surround her at every turn. Snipers on rooftops, guards disguised as pedestrians, an entire army waiting for Marcus to make his move. I still don't like this, Isabella said, watching the gallery through the car window. Her hands were shaking. Dante sat beside her, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. Say the word and we'll find another way. There is no other way, she knew that. Marcus would never stop searching, never stop hunting. This ended tonight one way or another. I'm ready. Dante caught her hand, his grip strong and sure. Remember, the moment he appears you get down and stay down, my men will handle the rest. And you. His smile was all teeth. I'll be the one who makes sure he understands exactly what happens to men who touch what's mine. What's mine? The words sent heat curling through her despite the circumstances. Isabella leaned in, pressing a quick, desperate kiss to his mouth. Dante stilled, then kissed her back, fierce and claiming and full of dark promise. Come back to me, he murmured against her lips. I will. The gallery was hosting an opening, the perfect crowd, the perfect cover. Isabella moved through the familiar space, her heart hammering, every nerve screaming danger. He came for her an hour in. She saw him across the gallery floor and their eyes locked. Marcus's face twisted with rage and triumph, and he started toward her, shoving people aside. Isabella, his voice carried over the music, you bitch. She ran. It was part of the plan, lead him away from the crowd into the alley behind the gallery where Dante's men waited. But the terror was real, the instinct to flee overwhelming her training. Marcus caught her at the back door, his hand brutal on her arm. Did you really think you could hide from me, did you think? I wasn't hiding. Dante's voice cut through the night like a blade. He stepped from the shadows, and even in the dim light he was terrifying. She was waiting. Marcus spun and his face went white. Dante Russo, this is none of your business. You made it my business when you beat a woman half to death outside my club. Dante moved closer, and Isabella felt more than saw the dozen men materializing around them. Worse, you put a bounty on her head, on someone under my protection. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, because you're an arrogant little parasite who thinks his family name means something in this city. Dante's smile was death itself. Let me explain how this works. Isabella Morty is mine, my responsibility, my concern, and anyone who touches her answers to me. Marcus made a desperate lunge for Isabella, but Dante was faster. One moment Marcus was moving, the next he was on the ground, Dante's foot on his throat. Who did this to you? Dante asked softly, looking at Isabella. Say his name. She understood. He was giving her this, the choice, the power, the final word. Marcus Vitelli, she said, and her voice didn't shake. He did this to me. Dante nodded, then to Marcus, you're finished. Your family won't protect you, they can't afford to start a war with me over their favorite punching bag, your associates won't help you, they know better, and you'll never touch another woman again. You can't. I can, I am. Dante increased the pressure and Marcus choked. By sunrise you'll be on a cargo ship to Eastern Europe, sold to some very unpleasant people who have uses for men like you. You'll live, but you'll wish you hadn't. It was worse than death. Isabella knew it, Marcus knew it, and from the terror in his eyes he understood exactly what waited for him. Please, Marcus wheezed, please. Did she say please? Dante's voice was conversational. Did you stop when she begged? No, so neither will I, he nodded to his men. Take him. They dragged Marcus away, his screams fading into the night. Then it was just Dante and Isabella in the alley, the same alley where this had all begun. Is it over? She whispered. It's over. Dante pulled her close and she went, pressing her face to his chest. You're safe, you're free. Isabella started to cry, great, shaking sobs that tore through her. All the fear, all the pain, all the months of living in terror crashed over her, and Dante held her through it, solid and unbreakable. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, Tesoro, always. 3 months later. Isabella stood in the penthouse looking out at the Chicago skyline. Dawn painted the city in rose and gold, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt at peace. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she smiled, leaning back into Dante's embrace. You're up early, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Couldn't sleep, she turned in his arms, studying the man who'd saved her life and stolen her heart. I was thinking. About how I came here broken and afraid, about how you put me back together without asking anything in return, about how, she paused, searching for the right words, about how I'm in love with you. Dante went very still. Then slowly he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, the kind she knew he gave to almost no one. Good, he said simply, because I've been in love with you since the night I found you, since you looked up at me with those green eyes and refused to break even when you should have. He cupped her face. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Isabella Morty, and you're mine. Yours, she agreed and kissed him. Later, wrapped in silk sheets as morning light flooded the bedroom, Isabella traced the scars on Dante's chest, evidence of a violent life she was coming to understand. Do you regret it, he asked quietly, choosing this life, choosing me? Isabella thought about her rules, the ones she'd lived by for so long. Never trust anyone, never stay in one place too long, never fall in love. She'd broken all three, and she'd never been happier. No regrets, she whispered, not a single one. Dante pulled her closer, and in his arms, Isabella Morty finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Home. 6 months later. The new art gallery Isabella had opened, backed by Dante's money and connections, was a resounding success. Tonight's exhibition featured emerging artists, and the crowd was sophisticated and enthusiastic. Isabella moved through the space, elegant in a black dress, confident in a way she'd never been before. She was still herself, still cautious, still careful, but she no longer lived in fear. Mrs. Russo. She turned, still not quite used to the name, and found Benedetti smiling at her, the older man who'd given her that crucial lifeline in the restaurant. Mr. Benedetti, I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it, he looked around approvingly. You've done well for yourself. Thanks to you, if you hadn't intervened that night. You'd have found another way, he said gently. Survivors always do, though I admit I'm pleased at how things worked out. Dante is a good man, despite what people think. He is, Isabella agreed softly. And speaking of your husband, Benedetti nodded toward the entrance. Dante stood in the doorway, powerful and magnetic in a dark suit, and Isabella's heart still skipped when she saw him. He found her in the crowd immediately, he always did, and the look in his eyes was possessive and proud and utterly devoted. He crossed to her, ignoring everyone else, and pulled her into his arms for a kiss that made several guests gasp at its intensity. Get a room, Marco called good-naturedly from somewhere nearby. Dante pulled back just enough to murmur, how much longer do we have to stay? At least 2 more hours. He groaned and Isabella laughed. You're a powerful mafia boss, she teased. Surely you can survive an art exhibition. I've survived wars and assassinations, gallery openings are worse. But his eyes were warm, his touch gentle as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Worth it though, you're radiant tonight, Tesoro. Flatterer. Truth-teller, he kissed her again, soft and sweet. I love you, Isabella Russo. I love you too. Around them, the party continued. But in their own private world, Isabella and Dante simply held each other, 2 broken people who'd found salvation in the most unlikely place. Each other's arms. And outside, Chicago sparkled beneath the stars, full of danger and darkness and infinite possibility. But inside, wrapped in love and protection and peace, Isabella had everything she'd ever needed. She was safe, she was loved, she was home. And she would never run again.